Okay, now I did. You're muted though. Do do do. Noise.
Oh, what the hell? Um, are you there, Jim? Or oh, okay. Did that? Ah! Okay, that's maybe way too loud, or maybe that's just my microphone. Can you hear me now? Or oh, what the hell? No, not that one. Screen share, yeah, this one. Okay, and trying to get. Okay, hide that and clip in. Do we get the stupid frickin'?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Oh my, delightful. Okay.
Is my volume okay?
Yep. You're sounding great. I'm wondering how this might sound if I switch around and fiddle about. I know this is so unprofessional of me, but I'm still figuring out all the streaming technology, and I've only recently, in the last couple of months, gotten into using Livestream or OBS. And it was said that OBS should be able to record a Skype no problem, but
and yet.
Yeah, that's. I mean, this is why I actually bought a second screen now too, so we don't get the infinite screen of Doom during a stream and stuff. So I can look off to the side and with one thing. And let me see.
I've probably got about an hour because we've got a food delivery coming that I'll have to unpack. So, we can either stick to a short time, or we can wait till it arrives and I can come back. Or what do you prefer to do?
Well, it should. Well, if we're going to just cover this one article, that both me and you, I think, had probably opinions on when we first saw it. If you want to call that one up, the Guardian lifestyle. What a masculinity conference taught me about the state of men.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I can just both kind of read through it, and this is where it is on the Garden, as it's known, right?
The Grawny ad. Yeah.
The Garden.
They used to be notorious for spelling errors and bad editing, so they were called the Grawny ad.
There we go. I think so we can actually bring this one up. What the masculinity conference taught about me.
Taught me about the state of about the state of men, that one.
Yeah. John Bailey, a graduate student at Rutgers University in New Jersey, and Brenna Harvey. I'm sorry if I'm shuffling over things. You're going to catch that on my mic. Connecticut are showing a group, an even mix of men and women, mostly in their 30s. This is the first paragraph of this thing by Adam Abbott in New York. Are mostly graduate students of studying of gender, the fruits of their research into bronies, men who like My Little Pony, which is still one of the funniest things that so many people cannot figure this out. It's like, and most of the bronies, you just go kind of flat out, it's a good cartoon show.
Yeah. Well, I
Uh,
don't know. That's happened forever, hasn't it? People liking kids' cartoons. I think it's just because it's seen as a girls' cartoon. I guess that's why people react weirdly to it.
well, I think well for me personally, I condensed it to initially when I was watching is um I'd like to watch a TV show that does not begin every episode with a dead hooker in an alley.
Might be interesting if My Little Pony did.
God, yeah, but I mean, we're deluged in America, stateside. We've got so many channels, and they're just filling them all up with police procedurals nowadays, or reality
Yeah,
television. So no wonder that anything like Adventure Time or anything like My Little Pony catches on like this because it's just something different.
yeah.
But then they're talking about they have been studying a particularly extreme subset of the bronies. They explain men who fetishize the ponies. The pair bring up a screen grab. One brony has posted a picture of My Little Pony wearing sunglasses and drinking lemonade by a pool. In the comments beneath, the poster has made a fatal mistake, at least within this community, of admitting that he has lost quote wizard eligibility years ago, 25 years ago, unquote. That is, has had sex with a person. I guess this is coming out from Wizard Channels now. Everybody's going to be starting to use that as a term,
Yeah.
which, which actually shit. I wonder if the whole Wizard Chan and then of course using Wizard status or Wizard eligibility is that a reference to Terry Pratchett, or did
I
Terry Pratchett crib that from other books?
I don't know where that comes from. I mean, the idea that sex robs you of your power or magic or strength or whatever is as old as as old as legends and myths, really. So I don't know.
Yeah, but it was just the recently deceased Terry Pratchett kind of very much made the jokes around it, and pointing out all the little flaw or exploits that Wizard might come up with and whatnot. Ever since what was it, the Sorcerer, or no, equal, was it Sorcerer or Equal
Because
Rights?
that was why wizards aren't allowed to have sex. Yeah, it was sorcery.
Yeah. Um, and does not clop, of course, that is masturbate. To the other images, another brony responded immediately, "Go be normal somewhere else, faggot." And of course, and they, of course, at the International Conference on Masculinities, they take this as this is emblematic of there's some huge problem with men. And when this is clearly they're quoting 4chan. I mean, this is condescending Wonka time. You must be new here kind of thing.
Yeah, I find that a lot lately. I mean, I came up on bulletin boards via dial-up and Usenet and so on. So I'm very much an old hand at the internet. But it's like Chan culture is not a mystery by any means anymore. And these people who supposedly specialize in reporting on the internet and social media and net culture and game culture and stuff, they keep acting like Chan culture is either a surprise or that it's sincere. I mean, in that context, faggot is meaningless. It may as well just be like a grunt, like you know. But everyone acts like it's really shocking, whereas contextually it's nothing, And all these people reporting on these things keep acting like Chan culture is this big, shocking, terrible thing that betrays a real misogyny or racism or whatever, when it's just people shit posting, you know?
Oh yeah, and that's kind of the funny thing is it's the people who have been in this little area for a while know what most people are to take seriously. Although on Chan culture, it's interesting that I think Fee Monroe was mentioning that the motto of Gamergate on a different note, although a lot of this seems to all begin to tie in, has been what trust but verify,
Yeah.
right? The old quote from Reagan, and that almost seems to stem from 4chan's pics or it didn't happen. That old mantra.
Yeah, almost. Also, it's a reaction to Anita Sarkeesian's "Listen and Believe,"
Oh
And
yeah.
this, more generally, I mean, the reason all this stuff dovetails is that, Gamergate and the stuff we're reading here and everything else, it's all part of one much bigger, broader kind of culture war. I mean, that's a dramatic term. I don't, but I don't know a better one to call it. So yeah, all this stuff ties together because it all relates to the same thing, and part of that, to sound horribly pretentious, seems to be a clash between postmodernism and rationalism. So, and that's perfectly embodied by listen and believe versus trust but verify, because listen and believe says, yeah, always believe the victim, always listen and believe when you're told something, never question it, you might upset somebody. Whereas a more rationalist perspective asks, is this true? It doesn't ask about the emotions involved. It wants to establish what really happened, what's really going on, what are the facts. And to me, that's because I've been involved in a lot of these different clashes, but to me, that seems to be the kind of central culture clash that's going on.
Oh well, yeah. But on to the second paragraph, because I got nothing else to add to that, because that's a really good stuff. It is the second day of the International Conference of Masculinities, and of course, here I just like the. I'm looking up at their website, and this is a conference on masculinity or masculinities, and there's not one image of a bass boat. So automatic, son, I am disappointed. I've been to kind of masculinity or manly conventions or whatnot, where it is like outdoors and stuff, and things when it's things that obviously men like.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with a conference, you tend to have cars, outdoors, some form of geekery, because
red meat, drums, fire. Whoa.
Exactly. And yet here, this is the thing is we're going to study about men, we're going to talk about men and how bad they are. Is somehow they think that this is a delightful concept to gather around for.
So it should have been the International Conference on toxic masculinities.
Apparently, because as we delve into this year, the conference is being held in New York City at the Roosevelt Hotel in Manhattan. The conference is hosted by the Center for the Study of Men and Masculinities at Stony Brook University, in conjunction with 3 other organizations which are broadly working to improve gender equality by researching and or engaging men. Researching and just kind of staring at men and inferring a bunch of stuff that they must be going on in our minds, and then engaging manthropology. Oh God, no! We invented another one for them to. There's manspreading, mansplaining, now manthropology. And then engaging, which sounds like, oh, then we're gonna just talk down to men or shitlord them for the rest of the weekend. I'll bring up this because honestly, I'm not going to be doing much in here, so we might as well actually not be swipping around. Usually what I do when I stream is I'll do a bunch of artwork while I'm talking, but if I got to read through this, it's going to be a lot of me just not doing a thing. Doing the actual artwork of my webcomic.
Yeah.
Also, God damn it, you need 4 universities to figure out it. That ties into, I think, I can't remember if it is Jeff Foxworthy or Bill Engvall. I mean, a lot of comedians have bits on men and versus women.
And we tend to come off worse these days. It's less mother-in-law jokes, more aren't we stupid sort of jokes.
But it's not always...
that I care, but it's an interesting thing to observe. Men are an acceptable target for humor in a way that other people aren't.
But I think the jokes that I'm getting on tend to be along the line of women are complex. And also, if you talk about evolutionary psychiatry or evolutionary psychology, now they're talking about how there's a masculine brain and a feminine brain. And the feminine brain is like a bundle of wires. Everything's interconnected. That's why I can always pull up memories and stuff and associate things with feelings with their memories. And meanwhile, the male masculine brains, the more masculine style brain, has different amygdala and is more like a file shelves, file drawers and stuff, where everything just kind of gets locked away and pulled out when it's needed. But that
Mm.
allowed ancient men to focus like a laser beam, on hunting
Yeah,
tasks.
more kind of procedural and linear.
And then, of course, the jokes always go on into this, like, because women are complex, they always think that men are complex. And it's like, no, we're simple. If we're not thinking anything, if you ask us what we're not, if we're thinking anything, odds are, if we're not talking about what we're thinking, we're probably not thinking at all about nothing. And actually,
Yeah.
wait a minute, that also sounds like meditation.
I think there's some truth to these things, and in comedy it gets exaggerated, obviously. But the thing is, you're not allowed to admit that there's differences between the sexes, so that's the other problem.
Um, but hundreds of academics and activists will attend sessions over 4 days. Well, have attended, I guess, because this is written, after the fact. Facebook chief operating officer and famous show Sandberg, fresh from launching her Lean In Together campaign, which is another. That was such an embarrassing one, but there's more on that later. Campaign for Gender Equality was among other speakers, and author Naomi Wolf is chairing a session. It turns out that stories like those of Bailey and Harvey, about almost said Haley and Harvey or something, about repressive masculinity manifesting itself in the most unlikely of situations are quite common. And that's the thing, is they always think that this stuff is somehow negative, as opposed to people aren't trying to take themselves seriously when the internet is mostly used as a form of recreation.
Yeah, I mean that's going back to the Chan culture thing. They take it so seriously. Someone says the N word or calls someone a faggot on a Chan board. It's meaningless, but these people treat it like it's the end of the world. Whereas contextually it's like I said, meaningless. And they don't seem to understand. Well, I hate to use the word because it's got so stereotype, but they don't seem to understand banter or joshing or teasing each other. Right? They treat it all deadly seriously, as if it really means anything, and I don't think it necessarily does.
Now we're just social creatures in a way. But
Yeah,
even in a group of quote unquote self-described nerds who meet up and fight each other with form swords, there are parallels to the ways women are held back in more mainstream society. So once again, this is culture of the masculinities. Writing in the article, apparently they're just going to talk about how does this all affects women.
yeah,
And this always seems to be the thing is, uh, when they say lean in, or then they say he for she, or when they talk about men need to share these feelings so they can be more efficient at helping women, it always seems to tie back to feminists wanting men to do more for women.
yeah, and it fails to acknowledge that men even have problems, save as they relate to women. It's a stereotype. What about men's? But men do have issues, and you would think a conference on masculinities would be somewhere you might talk about those, but no.
But at the conference will offer some hope for men too, though. Oh, in one presentation, attendees learned that shed ownership is proving a real boon to gender equality in Ireland. Like a garden tool shed in the kind of like a
Like
garage.
a garden shed. There is a really interesting movement in Australia, I think, called the shed movement, and it's just a way for guys who are out of work or retired can get together, socialize, muck around with tools and so on. Um, Man cave shed. It's kind of the same thing. I don't know if you have the same kind of culture over there with it. But I mean, if you think about it, if a man has to step outside and go and sit in a shed to have any time or space to himself, he's been pushed out of the house, hasn't he? So, isn't it telling that a guy needs a shed? He's
Well,
he's not at home in his own house. He's got to go down to the end of the garden and sit in a wooden box.
well, wasn't it King Solomon who said there's nothing new under the sun? And this is really just what the things coming back from decades ago. Decades
Yeah,
ago, it forced integration of all the moose lodges and Rotary clubs and Possum Lake and whatever. If you know the Red Green Show.
I do not. But
Oh,
I
it's
don't
a
know the kind of thing you're talking about.
oh the Red Green Show was a parody sitcom parody of outdoor channel shows. Really carried a lot of the prime time for a lot of PBS stations in America and Canada. And the thing was, is around this place in Canada called Possum Lake, there's a Possum Lodge. Their motto, "Quando omni fluncus moritati," when all else fails, play dead.
I like that.
And but the thing was, it was it was a parody of outdoor shows, and it's an all male cast, and it's an all male lodge, right? So, and you don't 30, 40 years ago, they forced integration of all these gentlemen's clubs or men's clubs, communities and stuff, because, oh, that was where the men were doing the real power playing. And that's where all the machinations of the patriarchy happening. Right. And so now what we see is this, no, they're not organizing as groups like they used to. They're not, doing these international organizations of the water buffalo like on the Flintstones, but they're still now we're just doing it in our backyards because that's what we've forced to. But we've always had the need for this.
Yeah, and it's always one way, isn't it? It's always the men's societies and groups get opened up into being co-ed, but women still get to retain their own spaces.
Well, they're the ones that need safe spaces where they won't be judged.
Well, see, that's what nerd spaces have been for a lot of guys, I think. Even though nerd spaces have always been co-ed, and I think that's why you see, that's why you see some of the resistance to people kind of coming in and intruding, because it's like, where do I get to be myself anymore?
Exactly. I mean, we found, okay, we're at another level of retreat or just going off into the woods or whatever. And back to the Red Green Show is one of the things is midway as the show gained in popularity, networks were asking, should we add female characters? And the people most adamant against women being introduced to the television show were the women viewers.
Interesting.
Well, yeah, they love the comedy. They love the way these men had a relationship, instead of including a bunch of well-known Canadian actors for these different, because it's kind of a sketch comedy show, but they like to see, and it's the Top Gear factor. If people said, well, how about if we added a fourth host to the British Top Gear and it's going to be a woman, you'd probably see the same rejection of the idea of this, not on account of it's a woman would have.
It changes the dynamic, and
the commercials all say the guys are ladding about, and people wouldn't be afraid. Well, if there's a woman present, all of a sudden these guys won't be free to be themselves. Because you'd have to watch your language, because there's always this feeling that once a woman comes in, everybody has to stand up and sit down and and watch our language. All of a sudden we can't tap out your stogies or whatever and into our brandy glasses, because I think that's how we're
supposed to act, apparently.
Yeah. Well, because men are constantly in fear of female judgment. It comes from when we're little boys.
Well, yeah, and men care about women and want them to feel welcome and happy and all that. Which sounds odd given all this resistance and so on, but that's part of the reason for some of the resistance, I think. That's things are an intrusion sometimes, and it's unfortunate, but that's just how it is.
And then, of course, there's the last sentence of this one. In another, we learned that men in the U.S. are showing real progress in quote-unquote friendship labs designed to teach men how to be friends with one another. And of course, here's some DVD. There's this, and it looks like there's a series of DVD documentaries. And this is the thing: is the reason why these things always seem to, I mean, just like almost any other convention in a way, is to sell stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, the end of the day, what these people held this thing for was to just try to shill whatever book, whatever. And that's the thing: you're going to notice almost everybody here they mention has to some degree a book or a DVD that you're supposed to pick up that explains everything.
Yeah, a bit like a sort of new age fair in a lot of ways, isn't it? Sort of only it's self help books and yeah, this is the problem sort of stuff.
Bailey and Harvey found that there was a community on the image-based bulletin board of 4chan who've, like My Little Pony, within this community, having sex with a real person in real life is seen as a negative and not clopping in a form as heresy. No, it's a joke, you guys. I think we already covered that. But then they get into what was happening here was an example of normal, quote unquote, hegemonic masculinity in action, Bailey and Harvey said. The term hegemonic masculinity is used a lot here. And no, it is a theory of how men manage to assume and retain dominant positions in society at the expense of women. And one of the things I think nobody steps on is most positions, I mean, of what would be the dominant positions in society or the perceptibly dominant positions in society are often, no, not at the expense of, but for women.
Mm. And I mean, a brony subculture is, well, by implication at least, an all-male group anyway. So it would be assuming and retaining dominant positions over other men within the subculture. I don't see where women come into it.
Yeah. Being
also, I have to get this out. Why is clopping a euphemism for masturbation? Surely it's really difficult without thumbs.
Yes, but apparently they manage with hooves. It was or like referring to
Godspeed, bronies. Godspeed.
As referring to the butt as the plot. Was another one that quickly came about. Being a hegemonic male means powerful, dominant, stoic, successful, like actors Arnold Schwarzenegger or Jason Statham. It is not about being weird or different. And that's, I think, this is where I think these bits where they discuss nerd culture are. They think that men, just because they have a different hobby, are supposed to be magically different.
Yeah. I really don't see how this hegemonic masculinity thing applies to all male or predominantly male subcultures. And often when a woman does enter a predominantly male space, they end up elevated quite quickly. You often end up with what's the term? Queen bees. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I find it really hard to follow this, and Stoicism out of that list, I don't see Stoicism as genuinely being a sort of negative trait. I mean, they're saying powerful, dominant. They're kind of implying here that those are all negative things. But Stoicism, I mean, being strong in the face of adversity, being someone that other people can rely on, seems to me to be a positive. It doesn't seem to be a negative. It doesn't seem to be a toxic aspect of masculinity to me, unless you take it too far and you never ever reach out for help, you know. But to me, that seems like a positive, stereotypically masculine trait.
And that's the thing is Stoicism is the reason why we have Stoicism, and even women have natural Stoicism too. These part that doesn't seem to get acknowledged in the modern day because possibly we've just made the world so cushy for everybody that suddenly Stoicism is somehow seen as a negative when you used to have crop failures. You used to have wars happening all the time. And nowadays we're much more also, well, we also have to deal with in the common era earthquakes and tornadoes and hurricanes and stuff. So there's natural disasters happening all the time. Stoicism is part of what helps us buckle down and actually clear the debris.
Yeah, and then you can have a breakdown later, you know, afterwards. Yeah, survive first. And yeah, I didn't mean to say women don't have stoicism too.
But I'm not saying that you meant to say that, but I'm saying that there's this lack of admission that both sexes can have stoicism, and it's an important survival trait, like you were mentioning.
Yeah.
But for some reason there's a politicization of this in the politicization of men or masculinity or what they perceive as masculinity?
See, I think they're implying here that because these ideals are, or these traits are held as important by men, and that women don't necessarily tend to meet them. I'm trying to read into the paragraph here. That's what holds women back, in that if they're competing on the same traits and ideals that men compete on, then they don't necessarily do so well and are held back. But I don't think that's necessarily true. I think each gender is held to different standards to a degree. I mean, taking an example from this country, Margaret Thatcher strove on a male basis, on a very male stereotypical personality, and so on, and did very well. But she was completely disowned by wings of the feminist movement in the 80s, who said she wasn't even a woman, or is she a woman? No, not on my terms, I think was what one Labour MP said. So striving to succeed on men's terms won't necessarily work, I suppose, and it's not necessarily something that you need. I think you can succeed on feminine terms as well. I think men can succeed on feminine terms.
Oh yeah. Well, but that also is like I was mentioning how there's the two different brain types, and one of the things I've always wondered is if we looked at the early adopters of women in geek spaces, in these kind of traditionally males, or what would be viewed as traditionally masculine spaces, the early video game playing women, or the women who play like the hardcore games still, like the first person shooters and stuff. I wonder if we'd actually find a slightly different adrenaline to aggression to reward cycle than a woman or a man who predominantly plays the Candy Crushes, the casual games without a lot of aggression in them.
Yeah, a more masculine brain, for want of a better term. I wouldn't be that surprised. Having grown up through nerd cultures and the kind of women I used to hang out with. I mean, I'm not saying they're mannish or anything, but they definitely didn't have, and still don't have, many of the concerns that keep bubbling up from Tumblr. um, they're happy with games as they are. They're happy with comics as they are. I mean, they've got useful input, but they put it in a way that's not strident and hateful and trying to force change. And they're just as resentful of other people coming in and fucking it up as the guys are.
Yeah. After the talk, Bailey tells me that one of the main takeaways from the pair's research is that it adds the understanding of how and why even young men can, quote, reject feminism so aggressively and so vehemently. Yeah, because when a lot of the feminist narrative is telling you you're bad.
What does feminism even mean anymore? When someone tells me they're a feminist, I no longer know what that means. 4 years ago, I'd have called myself a feminist because I believed in equality, and that's often you get that sort of dictionary definition thrown at you. But that's not what I see feminism doing in the day to day. I see things like the porn filter or the extreme porn ban. I see fuss over Batman covers. I see campaigns to try and get social media and the internet cracked down on so that it's safer for women. A great threat to free communication. You see all this kind of. Oh, you see scientists harassed into tears for the kind of shirt they're wearing, shit like that. That's the public discourse on feminism, and that's the feminism you see day to day, and that's the feminism that I think men reject so aggressively and vehemently, especially when it blames them for everything. And who can blame them for that?
Yeah. I'm going to skip a few paragraphs actually, because they could talk more about the Leaning Together campaign. And well, actually, here's the thing that really got one of the people in feminist movement who is attempting to talk past that resistance to, being told they have privilege and men being told that there's a patriarchy is Sandberg. I collared her before the conference's official opening gala. She and oh yeah, to the article, in the comments, there are people reacting negatively to his use of "I collared her."
Did they think it was a BDSM reference or something?
No, it was like, oh, it's so aggressively used. Typical male aggression.
Laid her bodyguards and wrapped a chain around her throat and led her to my quarters. Yeah. No, I think not.
And she has managed to get some of the most popular sportsmen in the U.S. and basketball player LeBron James, for one, to back her Lean In campaign, which combines elements of educating men about the plight of women with a carrot and stick approach. This is a really problematic. And if this was her term, it was. If it's his terminology, it's bad. If it's hers, it's worse. Of saying carrot and stick approach to encouraging them to improve behavior. It's
Yeah, that's pretty
very dehumanizing. We have
yeah.
to God, we have to help men see that equality is not just the right thing to do, but actually benefits for them. Men who lean in work support women better. One of the most notable parts of her campaign is its introduction of the word chore play, introducing men to the idea that those of them who share the housework and childcare with their partners get more sex than those who do not.
As I recall, there's been a couple of articles about studies into that, and it's not true, according to those studies, that men who engage in traditionally, but I'm not saying I agree with it, but men who engage in traditionally female housework apparently are getting less sex because they're not seen as masculine, whereas men who engage in traditionally male chores around the home, the DIY, taking the rubbish out, that sort of thing, get more. So I don't know. I'd like to see the original study that she's citing that says that, and I'd like to compare it with the studies that say the opposite, and see where it shakes down.
I think you can also just compare it to like how often you see couples, or how many people can comment that, oh yeah, every time I try to wash the dishes and put them away, I'm always, apparently according to her, I'm putting them in the wrong places because she has a specific way she likes the dishes set up or whatever. And then of course in another video for the Lean In, she talks about how there's a pay gap in allowances.
Children's pocket money, yeah.
Yeah, and she says like her example to the interviewer, and this is a softball interview, is because boys get paid more versus girls, and the boys will take out the garbage and they get paid more than the girls get paid for setting out the dinner settings.
Okay, well, which is the harder job?
Yeah, which is you're lugging something that is, I mean, if you're talking about a small boy, the garbage bag can be roughly his size, even if it is technically lighter than him. But it's also going to be often smelly, unpleasant work.
Yeah, that's probably the only time in anyone's life where a bin collector gets paid more than a food service worker.
Well, actually, your bin collectors, I don't know how it is in England, but is a pretty strong government union. I mean, yeah, but the trade-off is in America, and in you're a sanitation engineer, you smell pretty bad at the end of the day, probably, but you're working for the city government, so it's a government union, it's city employees, and you're getting a pretty decent amount of money.
I honestly don't know what it's like anymore. I know it was privatized, so it's private companies now. It's not government, not union, and it's stereotypically it's one of those jobs like cleaning toilets that's paid rubbish and is a horrible job. So yeah, I don't actually know. So apologies to any bin men listening who may be Scrooge McDucking it when they get home. I have no idea.
Well, they might be, because as Mike Rowe in Dirty Jobs pointed out, a lot of the there's another thing. If you look at traditionally masculine and traditionally feminine spaces and roles, so much of just go through a baseball clicker and watch an entire series of Mike Rowe's Dirty Jobs and just count off the actual women you see in that TV show. when he talks about people who work in like the sewage and work in, and these are often people who are specially educated, college educated, just to work in these systems and making a large amount of money, sometimes like easily 6 figures. But at the end of the day, you're still going to have to put on a sealed suit with an air supply and dive into liquid. Ugh.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting, though, how we always talk about gender gaps in STEM fields or CEOs or something, but never in sewerage workers or long haul truckers or that sort of thing. There doesn't seem to be as much attempt to get women into those jobs, does there?
No, never does. And using sex as a tool for gender, back to the articles, using sex for general equality, it feels like a distant proposition of the next day. No, not really a distant proposition for sci-fi. No, it sounds instead like you just hoard yourself for clean dishes. That's kind of embarrassing. That is the lowest. You always hear about the high-paid escorts who make thousands of dollars, thousands of dollars to fly out to Dubai or whatever and hang out with Arab sheiks and whatever. And I did it for the dishes. That's
I clean some pretty mean dishes. I got ladies.
No, I just want to combine that though with Gorian chore play. See what happens there.
Actually, that's quite interesting, but that's going off topic a bit.
Yeah. That'll be another if I ever do one of these things again. But here they're talking about Dagger here. And Dagger here is like Nero and a lot of the others. That's one of those getting in a field and smashing each other with foam weaponry. And I listened to a presentation entitled Epic Glory and Manhood Acts in Fantasy Role-Playing. Dagger here is a case study. Dagger here is a battle recreation game or recreation game. Quote, think Tolkien, Game of Thrones, says Speaker James Martin, a sociology graduate student in the Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And there's a photograph of an overhead projector of a singularly unthreatening looking battle troop. They're standing in a field carrying foam swords and shields and spears, swords. And it's a LARP. It's LARPing, Yeah. And the thing... Martin has spent the past year researching one group of Dagger Hero enthusiasts at the Indiana University of Pennsylvania. He wanted to find out if, like Bailey and Harvey's clopping bronies, they acted differently from other men. Because I'm a nerd, I was able to get more unique conversations, Martin says of his subjects. Martin found out that the Dagger Hero group conformed to masculine norms in several ways. One of the most significant heartbreakingly was in how they dealt with what seems to have been a near constant barrage of insults from non-Dagger Hero playing hecklers. The group would cope by ignoring the insults. How dare they? Pretending they were unhurt by them. How dare they? Pushing their feelings down deep inside. Or they just share their feelings with their buddies privately. Other than
I've just had a knock on the door, so I'll be back in a sec, okay?
Okay. I wonder if actually diving into here and into my folders and picking up my downloaded music from Incompetech, because I know I can get that playing now through my live stream. Figured out how to do that. I've got some and let's see. I always still like that unclassifiable oddities, and I wonder if that'll play up here. Ooh, too loud. And I wonder if when I come back, if that'll play on his. See, if I can actually get that, that'll be an interesting way to start up things. Because I guess what I'm going to go until he's back. Shoot, and here I was so. Hoping for. Is there a pause button actually on the thing? Well, there's not a pause broadcast. It's going to. Here I didn't even bother to. YouTube, and my channel. And take that down a bit. It's not like I have anyone in a chat room. Back to, and we've got. But Decker, you're playing high class. And of course, you got the guy wearing the kilts. Those are classic. There's a huge thing, such a huge thing from sci-fi of men wearing that. And actually, he's pretty damned buff. This is the funny thing. I'm going to just actually spend a bit of time playing around with this because, like I said, I'll edit around this bit because I really hadn't.
I do apologize. That was my grocery delivery coming early.
Oh, that's a completely different subject. Damn. How many people actually just invite you on for podcasts just to talk about how different England is from the United States?
None, but that would be a good subject.
Just little things because Mike, you just had groceries getting delivered. Sorry, just hit the boom mic.
Yeah, it's quite common these days. So like you pay like £5 or whatever, and they bring your weekly or monthly shop to you. So, and you order it all online.
I think the only thing that would keep that out of many of the suburbs of the United States is food delivery, except for pizza and some Chinese in my area, is pretty rare. And
I can't get takeaway delivery. I live out in the countryside, about 4 to 6 miles from the nearest towns, and I can't get takeaway delivery. Not for the life of me. But groceries I can get.
Wow. So bizarre reversal. I'm in the middle of a packed suburb, and yeah, the Krogers and whatever, you see a lot of people on mobility scooters and, wheeling around inside there for their stuff instead of getting it just delivered to the home, because it's the stores around here, I guess, don't do that. I think there probably are just different services now that apps are building up that you can do these things, but
I think it's really good. It works out the same as or cheaper than driving or taking a bus or whatever. You don't have to worry about how much you can. And it really, really stops you impulse buying. So it's good that way. Anyway, where were we? And I hope you weren't just old.
I wasn't getting ahead of you, but I was just kind of going back to notice this picture of, you got the guy in the kilt, you got a guy in a loincloth, you got a guy full clothing with a lot of color splashes and stuff. It's a kind of a mix of fantasy style and modern clothing. They're not going to Lindy beige, to try and be as historically accurate as possible in this game.
Yeah, then they look pretty buff, pretty fit.
That's what I was about to point out. They look fairly buff, and I think what is so startling, or what at least the people that the conference can't understand, is that nerds can be new. Nerds aren't these stereotypical, thick-rimmed glasses, stoop-shouldered, 110 pounds underweight. Well,
speak for yourself. I am.
Okay. I don't know your photo. You looks like you're sitting up pretty straight there.
I am in awe of cosplayers and the dedication they put in, not just their costumes, but their bodies as well. I just cannot get that motivated,
And
and yet
let's
they're nerds.
yeah, and oddly enough, if we're going to talk mention cosplay even briefly, um, there's a very interesting aspect to the, the first people I think to monetize being a cosplayer have been women.
Yeah,
Just women who put a lot of dedication not only to making a very attractive uh, and exacting outfits, but also
yeah.
very attractive and exacting bodies. So that's
Well, yeah. Let's be real. The reason that they can be so successful is primarily because they are women, and lots of guys are willing to pay to see women in skimpy costumes and so on. But that doesn't take away at all from what they do or the amount of dedication involved. Just staggering. Just staggering.
oh yeah. But for these guys to be heckled and then not showing. Here's the thing: is like when is exactly telling people expressly, that are just off in the distance heckling you or whatever, going and saying, "Hey, you hurt my feelings." Exactly when.
How is that going to help? It's just going to, well, if anything, it's going to escalate the situation. You're giving the hecklers what they want, which is a reaction. Don't feed the trolls, you know? Um, and I like to show feelings because it's at least not in a context like that, because it is a sign of weakness. It's asking for someone to do more damage to you, and it's gonna delegitimize you in the face of your peers. Later on, maybe you might complain about it, but
But also, how often is that also going to be taking the context of you and your buddies instead of wow, he really made me feel less than a person because of what this jerk said, and how much of it is going to be, hey, that guy was an asshole, wasn't he?
yeah, exactly. I mean, how this is a common thing I run into, and I was trying to answer for myself. What is the answer here? Is it that men need to be more need to be softer and need to admit their emotions more, or is it that women need to toughen up, or is neither true? In Simpsons terms, do you need to man up or girl down? What's the deal here? What's the best way to deal with these things? I don't. At least for men, as things stand currently, I don't think. Yeah, marching over to someone that's been heckling you because you're prancing about in your elf costume and going, "You really hurt my feelings." I don't think that's going to help. I think it's going to make things worse. You're better off to go off and commiserate with your mates afterwards.
I've always
You know,
been
I,
the ability, the most important thing is to have fun, I think, if you're doing these things. And if somebody, you know I think this has been kind of the bizarre thing of Gamergate, is this angle of the culture war. At this point, the culture war had become one side had decided to weaponize fun. They'd rather, hey, we'd rather come up with new memes, joke around continuously online all night, and see who can make everybody else laugh.
yeah, and that's the fun side to be on. It's got to be said. The side with the jokes and the memes and the porn stars and all that. That's the side you want to be on.
Exactly. Um, One of the recurring themes of the conference is the sense that men are not doing too well for themselves. As hard as these men might try to escape a quote unquote traditional boys don't cry tough guy version of masculinity by becoming obsessed with My Little Ponies, or calling themselves nerds and running around in a field in fancy dress, they're always influenced by this. By it. And the thing is remember, this whole conference is somehow saying that this is a bad thing, or this is somehow an example of. Well, here's the thing: is that a few feminist scholars have said, and this seems to be a recurring meme with them, is that boys are broken versions of little girls.
Yeah, I've heard that said before, and yeah, regarding men as kind of damaged women does seem to be a common thread rather than starting from scratch and saying, okay, well, what is the actual deal here? There seems to be this idealized.
I'll tell you what the ideal is. We're not a broken version. Little boys aren't a broken version of little girls. Grown men are the genetically engineered super soldier version of women.
Well, technically, there's actually a lot to go with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, just the plain common sense of it, okay, women did the mate selections millions of years ago, and we were apparently at some point bred like dogs to be bigger and faster and stronger. We're Steve Rogers to your Barbara Gordon.
Don't blame me. Your ancestors fucked my ancestors. It's your fault. I am the result of 3.75 billion years of bad mating choices. You have only yourself to blame.
Oh, that's what I always go for, though. But My Little Pony are column says this is the thing is they have a stereotypical in these articles that these portions of the article they have this stereotypical idea of what nerds are supposed to be like, and it's kind of the nerds aren't real men or are incapable of manning up or something like that. So we're supposed to find allies in that community, right? Because they're supposed to be victims. That's it. They expect nerds to be victims of bullying or just the victim narrative, and so that they will automatically then buy into the feminism.
Yeah. Whereas what we actually tend to see is that these nerd communities that have been subjected to so many outside attacks from Frederick Wortham or Pat Pulling and Bothered About Dungeons and Dragons or Jack Thompson, and we look at people from outside with suspicion, and it for good reason. So when someone comes along and tells us, you should be on our side, but oh, by the way, you're doing everything wrong and everything you love is problematic, people are going to look at you cross-eyed and wonder what your agenda is, and quite right too, really. Especially when it comes to fantasy. Because it's about escapism, and then here you come dragging all your real world problems into my elf game, and you can fuck off.
Yeah. This is reinforced a couple hours later when I attended a talk called "Breaking the Male Code: How Close Male Friendships Can Change Men's Lives," and this is somehow under the assumption that men are incapable of already. See, there's only in the modern age do we think that we need a workshop or a training program for people to then be able to have somehow friends.
Yeah, and we can't acknowledge, even the possibility that men might express friendship differently.
Yeah, it's friendship for me is often not just the feelings. It can be, I could consider friendship something like, oh, if you say you're having a down in the dumps day or whatever on Facebook, I'll click like sees or share sees or whatever, or put a hug through the internet, or oh, my friggin' car is broken. My car is having troubles. Okay, I'm going to swing on over, drive 40 miles up to your place, and we're going to go work on that.
I was reading something about that in the male friendships, according to I can't remember where I read it, but male friendships are primarily defined by doing stuff. So, it's the group of guys that go out drinking together, or the group of guys that get together and fix up old cars, or, a gaming group that meets every month, or, that sort of thing. So they're defined by shared stuff.
Yeah, shared hobbies,
experience.
Shared experiences and stuff. And I'm expecting to hear examples of great male friendships and the benefits of this, like the U.S. illusionist who entertains Penn and Teller or Batman Robin. Instead, Robert Garfield, a psychiatrist, therapist, and psychiatry lecturer at the University of Pennsylvania, tells us that men of the modern age are lonely. They want to speak to their male friends about their feelings, but they do not. It's the idea of the male stoic again. quote, emotional intimacy skills are not God-given. They are not in the nature of men, Garfield says. He has just written a book called Breaking the Male Code. And once again, like I was pointing out earlier, there's always a goddamn book or a DVD or a seminar to pay your way into, to where they tell you the secret to it all. And he shows us a slide from his research, which states that more than 60% of men want greater emotional closeness in their male friendships. In his friendship labs, Garfield teaches how to be friendly with one another. Attendees use a quote, and this is one of the most irritating things of this, the feelings wheel to identify how they are feeling.
I'm sorry, that's just ridiculous. I cannot take that seriously, and I bet most guys can't take that seriously either, apart from the kind of people that would attend one of his workshops. And then, you know, how much use is that, really?
Oh, this is all a lot of preaching to the converted, appears to be. They come to his sessions once a week, Garfield says. The hardest part is when they try to apply what they have learned when they are hanging out with their friends, with their unsuspecting buddies. At a talk called Engaging Men and Boys for Gender Equality, I'd expected a lot of activist-type rhetoric about getting men to sign up for emails or turn up at marches or wear badges, but much of the discussion I heard was about identifying what was wrong with men and working to fix it. That seems to be the entire theme of this conference, of saying men are wrong, men are broken, one are man, and we have to, and then, of course, we, the feminists specifically, not just women in general, but the feminists specifically have to fix it. And it's always in ways that are never, they don't seem to list any ways of that are, let's be supportive of men or let's try to understand men more.
No.
It's always,
pause for a moment and reverse that. You know, what if we had a big conference that was mostly, you know, men and, I don't know, ideological masculinists there to discuss what was wrong with women and how to fix it? That would be completely unacceptable. It's completely beyond any kind of bounds of. I mean, you can't imagine anything like that happening. It's that transgressive. And yet this way round, it's we just kind of whatever and go on with our day. It's weird.
And it's. I don't think we would. I don't think most men, if you ask them, wouldn't want women to change to being something more masculine. We actively pursue an other, quote unquote. I mean, and I bet you, I think you'd probably even possibly find this if we talked about the male and masculine and feminine brains. And if we did studies about that, we'd probably find that women with more tomboyish masculine brains might end up with guys who are more sensitive with a more feminine brain, because we might even be subconsciously trying to find these flips, and instead of trying to pound square pegs into round holes, we should be trying to match up complementary aspects.
Complementary traits. Make up for each other's shortcomings and complement each other's strengths.
Mm-hmm. And the thing that the feelings wheel and the desire for men have to share their feelings with women, but also this is the disturbing point for me. The point of this conference is that
excuse me.
No problem. This is a conference dedicated to trying to find ways for men to share their feelings with the people who have t-shirts and mugs declaring that they bathe and drink male tears.
Yeah.
It's you mentioned.
Why would I want to? Why would I want to make myself vulnerable to someone that clearly hates me purely on the basis of my gender?
It's not, like you mentioned, don't feed the trolls, and here it's not only feeding the trolls, but here's the blueprint on how to hurt me further.
Yes, here are the Death Star plans. Please kick me square in the exhaust port.
Nice one. So the final paragraph is, he's learned that it's quite hard being a man. Presumably most men want to conform to a state of being an arsehole, but we still don't want to be an arsehole. But you're assuming that, and this is once again, this is the assumption that these are arsehole-ish traits.
Yeah.
That the once again, the entire thing is men must be masculinity, or just what we perceive as masculinity must be somehow bad for people, and not have developed over the last few million years for good reasons. Men lose out in our patriarchal society too, it seems, and that's the tinfoil coming out.
Well, see, there's no doubt that historically there have been patriarchies, and that even today in some countries we have patriarchies. But to apply that definition to Western society is just nonsense. Because the very phrase like patriarchy hurts men too that gets trotted out and is kind of paraphrasing what's said there contradicts itself. Because if a patriarchy hurts men, then it's not a patriarchy by definition, because a patriarchy is a society run by and for men. So if men are missing out and losing out and are being treated shittily, then it's not a patriarchy. It might be something else in which men tend to do quite well, but it certainly isn't a patriarchy. It's just... And yeah, it's gotten so bad that when someone says patriarchy, I hear invisible space lizards whenever they say it. It's just conspiratorial nonsense.
And it so often disregards the meritocracy. And if we are a lot more is explained if we are just a meritocracy that's occasionally gets bogged down by various political corruptions throughout and it's going in patterns or in waves. Because when feminists say that we've always had patriarchies and they always oppress women, and there's a lot of like very dark blanket statements, they throw aside all the it's like the Elman Kuntzes of the world, or if you look at the Victorian era where women came to the prominent, but they were specifically rich women who were involved in the betterment, or England has had so many female leaders over its centuries, including queens and empresses. You have Empress Maud and the various Marys and Elizabeths and stuff. So it seems to be, if you're wealthy, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. If you're
wealthy, right breeding, or
if you have the access to the right resources and the right amount of competency, it doesn't matter.
I mean, I'm a hoary old socialist, so a lot of these things that people put down to identity politics, I can't help but see in terms of wealth and class. I mean, I think a lot of the conflicts in America around race are really, when you drill down to what's really going on, it mostly actually seems to be about wealth and class, because you have this underclass that pretty much coincides in a lot of places with race, because American society and a lot of capitalist societies have very little vertical movement in terms of rising through the classes. So if you start at the bottom, you tend to stay at the bottom, unfortunately. So and it's well known that poorer people are more likely to commit crimes, more likely to have various other issues, more likely to take drugs or alcohol, and it all adds up. It looks like more of a race problem than it is. Not to say there isn't racism as well, but the problem to me looks like it's far more to do with wealth and class. But that's my own biases.
And for me, where I start off as a conservative libertarian end of the spectrum, or the quadrant, I always notice that America is has a hard time talking about poverty, because our poorest poor can still often be just as well off as the working, the higher end of the working classes in other countries.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of luxury that is just, when Americans will take the time to line up for phones, and not like the latest high-priced version of the gadget, even though they might have already just discarded one, or might already have one that's only like a year or two old. And yet these people will often also be the same people talking about how little money they have and how we need this massive redistribution of wealth. And it's like, if we just look at the historical perspective, or even just a
Yeah.
broader worldwide perspective, being such a it is a
Well,
holish to talk about woe me when okay, yeah, we're over the
well,
internet.
as I recall, and I'm going on memory here, so I might be incorrect, but the way in which poverty is connected with criminal behaviour, antisocial behaviour, and all those sorts of things is contextual. So it's within a country. So America has a pretty huge yawning wealth gap between its richest and poorest, and that's what tends to correlate with the criminality and so on. So comparing it to other countries is fair in one way in that it shows that your situation ain't necessarily that bad. But contextually, within America, it's the difference between the rich and poor there. It's what people are living and what people are seeing day to day that drives this issue.
And maybe that's just why the Catholic Church and before that the Jewish religion and most major religions actually also just have that thing of uh, you know the envy being a sin.
Yeah, and why they tend to exhort people to charity. I mean, altruism is a pretty basic trait to the human species. It's part of the reason we're successful, I think, because we're a cooperative social species. So it would make sense for religious ethical systems to kind of latch onto that and reinforce it.
Well, almost everything we refer to as a tradition is just what we came out of with our experimentation. But traditions tend to be okay, what did the society that didn't collapse do, and
Yeah, yeah. Though
and
I
then we'll
think
go with that.
I think the Pope has a bit of cheek to lecture others on charity from his golden throne.
Yeah, of course, if you're trying to advertise the religion itself, I mean, they didn't have modern media, so you basically just, if we cover everything with gold, the people will believe. If
Gold
we,
equals God. Yes.
yeah, say we can crib up, yeah. Oh man, hey, there's a bunch of stuff. You're a games writer, I'm an artist. There's a ton of ideas just to be mined from this kind of thing, conversation.
Yeah, I'd like to do this again. This is fun.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'd like to maybe get on some other time if you want to talk later about. You were mentioning class and how much of this seems to be a class thing, and I think that recent video of Milo Yiannopoulos.
Oh, what the talk show thing with the that
Yeah,
one?
yeah, the talk show bit from Sunday where he was talking on the BBC about the what the big question was: has Britain become unwelcoming?
Yeah, unwelcoming to men. Yeah, and he called someone darling. Yes.
Well, no, no, not that, but specifically the question was it wasn't men, it was blokes. The word used
Yeah.
was blokes, and I think that's important to what you were saying is
Oh,
that underclass or working class men.
do you understand the what bloke means as compared to man or guy or
Well, there's something to say that there's a lad culture, right? I know lads. I understand that. That's kind of
yeah?
the
It's
what we
it's kind of similar.
what we might
Uh,
call in America the dude bros and
yeah, not Desborough has this really negative connotation to it. It's the kind of like
mm,
the frat guy thing. A bloke is just your kind of happy-go-lucky, normal, everyday guy.
Alfie Doolittle.
Hard worker. Yeah, pretty much. Not quite a geezer, but a bloke. He's a
I
nice bloke, as people would say.
and thanks to Terry Pratchett's Dodger, I know what a geezer is. I know the
A
proper
diamond
definition.
geezer or a silly bollocks.
And but yeah, I think if you're taking of but you certainly wouldn't consider many people unless you're maybe Jeremy Clarkson to be a rich person and a bloke.
Yeah, of course he's in trouble lately. But
Yeah.
yeah, it might be interesting to talk about class and stuff because I mean, you say you're more of a conservative libertarian outlook, and I'm more of a anarcho-socialist outlook. So we might find some really interesting things to talk about there or
Well, yeah.
fight about.
Well, but that's the thing. Well, my point was is in this video, it seemed like the women who are on the feminist side, almost all you could see kind of a very straight up style that these women probably came from the same economic class.
Well, that's what you see. You see a lot of complaints from activists who are from minorities or from lower social class that feminism and other forms of activism have been hijacked by the sort of white middle class women, that sort of thing. I mean, if you look back to Gamergate again, sorry to drag it back to that, but you look at like Lifshitz and Kuchera and so on, they're all these, fairly well-off middle-class people. Lots of them have trust funds or rich daddies, and they come across as misery tourists who are doing it on the behalf of the poor benighted minorities. And it's kind of insulting.
Well, definitely, it seems like, well, not only that, because they make an assumption of enlightenment,
Mm,
and therefore it's free. It's acceptable for them to dictate to other people how those people should live.
yeah,
And that's what I think a lot of people are reacting so badly to this, because hey, we were just having fun. We were just in our own little safe. We were in our safe space having fun until you told us that our fun was quote unquote problematic.
and that's what makes Not Your Shield so interesting to observe. Actually, people from minorities and stuff standing up and saying, "No, fuck off, you don't speak for us," which you don't see happen often enough, I don't think.
Exactly. Well, thanks, Jim, for joining me. This is a really fun conversation. I got to figure out how to use Google Hangouts to a degree, and I'm probably gonna have to download this and maybe even figure out how to edit around things if we ever want to do this again.
Well, yeah, I mean, you should have. If you've got a YouTube channel, you should have the option to just upload it there for now.
Yeah.
And yeah, pop me a link when you're done.
Okay. Well, I think it'll be up directly uploading. Once again, guys, I've been Ben Rodriguez, aka Bar One Scorpio. That's B as in boy, AR, the number one Scorpio, SCORPIO, on DeviantArt, Fur Affinity, Twitter, and YouTube and live stream, and a bunch of other places, and Patreon. And my guest was JimGrim Desborough of Postmortem Studios, right?
Yep, that's right. And you can find me on Twitter at Grimachu, like Pikachu but grim.
And thanks. And now, how do we stop broadcast? There's a stop broadcast button.